The late afternoon sun poured through the glass atrium of the Riverside Mall, casting long shadows across the polished marble floors. The air buzzed with the hum of shoppers, the clink of coins at the arcade, and the faint aroma of pretzels from the food court. At the center of it all stood Danny Whitaker, a 68-year-old Vietnam War veteran, his weathered hands gripping a small, colorful gift bag. His silver hair was neatly combed, his faded denim jacket adorned with a single proud pin, a bronze star medal glinting faintly under the fluorescent lights. Danny's eyes, sharp despite his age, scanned the crowd for his granddaughter Emily, who darted off to browse a nearby toy store. Today was her 8th birthday, and Danny had spent weeks saving for the stuffed unicorn she'd been dreaming of. He just stepped out of the toy store, the gift bag swinging lightly in his hand, when he noticed a young boy, no older than 10, struggling to carry a tray of drinks from the food court. The kid's skinny arms trembled, and the tray wobbled dangerously. Without a second thought, Danny moved toward him, his old combat boots scuffing the floor. "Hey, kid, let me give you a hand," he said, his voice gruff but kind, the kind of tone that carried the weight of a man who'd seen too much but still believed in doing right. He steadied the tray, guiding it to a nearby table where the boy's family sat, their faces lighting up with gratitude. The boy's mother, a tired-looking woman in a nurse's uniform, thanked Danny profusely. "You're a lifesaver," she said, her smile genuine. Danny waved it off, a faint grin tugging at his lips. "Just helping out," he replied, turning back toward the toy store to wait for Emily. That's when he felt it, a heavy hand clamping down on his shoulder, spinning him around with a force that made his bad knee twinge. Standing before him was a mall security guard, a broad-shouldered man in his late 20s, his badge gleaming with self-important authority. The name tag read Carl. His eyes narrowed, scanning Danny's worn jacket, his slightly hunched posture, and the gift bag in his hand. "You need to leave, sir," Carl said, his tone clipped, dripping with disdain. "We don't tolerate loitering here." Danny blinked, caught off guard. "Loitering? I'm waiting for my granddaughter. I just helped that family over there." He gestured toward the table, but Carl's expression didn't soften. If anything, it hardened. "I saw you hanging around, bothering people," Carl snapped, stepping closer, his voice loud enough to draw curious glances from passers-by. "This is a family place. We don't need your kind causing trouble." "My kind?" Danny's voice was low, but there was a fire in it, a spark of indignation that hadn't burned this brightly in years. He squared his shoulders, the weight of his service, his sacrifices pressing against the insult. "I'm a veteran, son. I fought for this country. I'm here to buy a gift for my grandkid." Carl scoffed, folding his arms. "Yeah, I've heard that story before. Save it. You're out, or I'm calling backup." The crowd around them grew, whispers rippling through the shoppers. A teenage girl pulled out her phone, filming the exchange, while an older couple nearby muttered about disrespect. Danny's face flushed, not from embarrassment but from a slow, simmering anger. He'd faced worse: jungles, gunfire, loss. But this was a different kind of wound. He stood his ground, clutching the gift bag tighter, his knuckles whitening. "I'm not leaving without my granddaughter," he said, his voice steady but laced with a challenge. Carl's hand shot to his radio, his lips curling into a smirk. "Last chance, old man." Before Danny could respond, another guard appeared, a wiry guy with a buzz cut who looked barely out of high school. The two flanked Danny, their postures aggressive, as if he were some criminal mastermind and not a grandfather holding a stuffed unicorn. The second guard grabbed Danny's arm, twisting it just enough to send a jolt of pain through his old injury. "Let's go," the guard barked, pulling him toward the exit. The crowd's murmurs grew louder, a mix of shock and discomfort. A woman in a red coat shouted, "He didn't do anything!" But Carl shot her a glare that silenced her. Danny's heart pounded, not from fear but from the sheer injustice of it. He'd survived ambushes in Da Nang, carried wounded buddies to safety, and earned that bronze star pinned to his chest. And now, in the middle of a mall, he was being treated like trash. He stumbled slightly as the guards shoved him toward the glass doors, the gift bag slipping from his hand and hitting the floor. The unicorn's sparkly horn peeked out, a cruel reminder of why he was here. As they reached the exit, Danny caught sight of Emily emerging from the toy store, her eyes wide with confusion. "Grandpa?" she called, her voice trembling. Danny's heart broke at the sight of her, but before he could reassure her, Carl pushed him through the doors into the parking lot. The cold air hit him like a slap, and the doors slammed shut behind him. He stood there, alone, the gift bag still on the mall floor, his granddaughter's voice echoing in his ears. The weight of the humiliation settled into his bones, heavier than any rucksack he'd carried in the war. But something else stirred too, a resolve, a flicker of the old fire that had gotten him through the darkest nights. We've only just begun this story, but trust me, it's about to get even more intense. Stay with us to see what happens when Danny faces even greater injustice. The parking lot outside Riverside Mall was a gray sprawl of asphalt, dotted with cars and the occasional shopping cart abandoned in the fading daylight. Danny Whitaker stood just beyond the glass doors, his breath visible in the chilly evening air, his hands clenched into fists. The sting of humiliation burned in his chest, but it was the image of Emily's confused face, her small voice calling Grandpa, that cut deeper than any insult. His granddaughter was still inside, alone, and that stuffed unicorn, the one he'd spent weeks saving for, lay discarded on the mall floor. Danny's bad knee throbbed from the rough handling, but he ignored it, his eyes locked on the entrance. He wasn't leaving without Emily. Not a chance. Inside, the scene was chaos. Emily, her pigtails bouncing, clutched the gift bag with the unicorn, her eyes darting between the toy store and the spot where she'd last seen her grandfather. Shoppers milled around, some whispering, others filming with their phones as Carl, the self-important security guard, barked orders to his younger partner, Buzzcut. "Keep an eye on the kid," Carl said, his voice low but sharp. "She's with that troublemaker." Emily overheard, her little face crumpling. "He's not a troublemaker, he's my grandpa!" she shouted, her voice piercing through the hum of the crowd. A few onlookers turned, their expressions shifting from curiosity to unease. A man in a flannel shirt muttered, "This ain't right," but no one stepped forward. Danny paced outside, his boots crunching on loose gravel. His mind raced, part fury, part strategy, the old soldier in him sizing up the situation. He'd faced worse odds, but this was different. This wasn't a battlefield, it was a mall, and the enemy wasn't some distant threat, but a system that seemed to spit on his service. He glanced at his reflection in the glass doors, seeing the bronze star pin glinting on his jacket. It reminded him of who he was, what he'd fought for. "I'm not done yet," he growled under his breath, his voice rough with resolve. Back inside, Carl's radio crackled with a message from mall management. "We've had complaints about a disturbance," a clipped voice said. "Handle it, but keep it quiet." Carl's smirk returned, his ego inflating. He strode toward Emily, who hugged the gift bag tighter. "Kid, you need to come with me," he said, reaching for her arm. Emily yanked away, her eyes blazing. "Don't touch me! I want my grandpa!" Her defiance drew more attention, and the crowd thickened, phones still recording. A young woman in a barista apron stepped forward, her voice trembling but firm. "She's just a kid. Leave her alone." Carl's eyes narrowed. "Mind your business," he snapped, but the barista didn't back down. She pulled out her phone, joining the others filming, her hands shaking with anger. Outside, Danny's patience snapped. He banged on the glass doors, his fist thudding against the cold surface. "Let me in! That's my granddaughter!" he shouted, his voice carrying the weight of decades of grit. A few shoppers inside turned, their faces a mix of sympathy and fear. Buzzcut, stationed near the doors, hesitated, his hand hovering over his radio. Danny's presence, tall, weathered, unyielding, made him nervous. "Stay back, sir," Buzzcut said, his voice cracking slightly. But Danny didn't budge. "You've got no right to keep me from my family," he said, his tone low, dangerous, the kind that made people listen. The tension inside escalated. Carl, now surrounded by a growing crowd, felt the pressure. His authority was slipping, and he didn't like it. He grabbed his radio, his voice sharp. "We need backup at the main entrance, now." The barista, still filming, started live streaming to social media, her caption reading, "Mall security harassing a kid and her veteran grandpa. This is wrong." Comments flooded in. Outraged emojis, calls for justice, hashtags like #veteranrespect. The video spread like wildfire, pinging across local group chats and community pages. Within minutes, a small group of shoppers formed a loose circle around Emily, their murmurs turning into demands. "Let her go to her grandpa," a burly man in a trucker hat shouted. Carl's smirk faltered, but he doubled down, stepping closer to Emily. "You're coming with me, kid," he said, his tone colder now. Danny, still outside, caught sight of the crowd through the glass. His heart lurched when he saw Emily, her small frame dwarfed by Carl's looming figure. His fists clenched tighter, nails digging into his palms. He'd promised Emily's mother he'd keep her safe, and now this? His mind flashed to Vietnam, moments when he'd had to make split-second decisions under pressure. This was no different. He scanned the parking lot, spotting a group of teenagers leaning against a pickup truck, their phones out, watching the commotion. "Hey!" Danny called, his voice commanding. "You kids got a phone? Call the local news. Tell them a veteran's being targeted at Riverside Mall." One of the teens, a lanky boy with a skateboard, nodded, already dialing. Inside, the barista's live stream hit a nerve. A local activist group, known for rallying against injustice, caught wind of it. Their group chat exploded with messages. "This is our fight. Get to the mall." Cars started pulling into the parking lot, tires squealing as community members, veterans, parents, locals arrived, drawn by the viral video. The crowd inside grew louder, their chants of "Let her go" echoing off the atrium's glass ceiling. Carl's face reddened, his hand twitching toward his belt, but the sheer number of eyes on him held him back. Emily, clutching the unicorn, looked toward the doors, her eyes searching for Danny. "Grandpa!" she called again, her voice breaking. Danny's banging on the doors grew louder, each thud a declaration of defiance. Buzzcut radioed for more security, his voice shaky. "We've got a situation," he said, glancing nervously at Danny. The old veteran's eyes burned with a fire that hadn't dimmed in decades, a fire that said he wasn't backing down. Not now, not ever. The crowd outside swelled, a mix of curious onlookers and angry supporters, their phones lighting up the dusk as they recorded. The air crackled with tension, the kind that promised something big was coming. "We're on the edge of the climax. What happens next will turn everything upside down. You can't miss the resolution of this story." The dusk sky glowed orange, reflecting off the sea of cars where a crowd of locals, veterans in worn caps, parents clutching kids, and activists waving makeshift signs gathered, their voices rising in a chaotic chorus of outrage. Danny Whitaker stood at the forefront, his weathered face lit by the flashing lights of a news van that had just screeched to a halt. His bronze star pin glinted defiantly on his denim jacket, a silent testament to the battles he'd fought, both in Vietnam and now here, for his granddaughter Emily. Inside the mall, Emily's small voice still echoed in his mind, her cry of "Grandpa" fueling the fire in his chest. He wasn't just fighting for her. He was fighting for every veteran who'd ever been spat on by a system that forgot them. Inside the mall, the atrium was a pressure cooker. Emily, clutching the gift bag with the stuffed unicorn, stood surrounded by a protective ring of shoppers. Strangers turned allies. The barista, still live streaming, narrated breathlessly, "They're bullying a kid and her veteran grandpa. This is America, people." Her video had gone viral, racking up thousands of views, with hashtags like #Justice for Danny trending across social media. The crowd's chants of "Let her go" shook the glass ceiling, drowning out the mall's cheesy music. Carl, the smug security guard, was sweating now, his hand hovering over his radio as he barked at Buzzcut, his younger partner. "Get control of this," Carl snapped, but his voice cracked, betraying his panic. The crowd wasn't backing down, and the arrival of more security guards only fanned the flames. A burly man in a trucker hat shoved forward, pointing at Carl. "You think you can push around a veteran? Shame on you." Outside, Danny's resolve hardened as the crowd swelled around him. The lanky skateboarder he'd flagged down earlier ran up, breathless. "News team's here, sir, and some veteran groups on their way." Danny nodded, his jaw tight. "Good," he said, his voice low but carrying the weight of a man who'd stared down death and wasn't about to flinch now. He turned back to the glass doors, banging again, each thud a demand for justice. "Emily!" he shouted, his voice raw. "I'm right here, kiddo!" The news crew scrambled out of their van, a reporter in a sharp blazer thrusting a microphone toward Danny. "Sir, can you tell us what happened?" she asked, her camera guy zooming in on his weathered face. Danny's eyes blazed. "They threw me out for no reason," he said, his tone sharp with indignation. "Called me a troublemaker. Me, a veteran who fought for this country. And they're keeping my granddaughter in there like she's some criminal." The reporter's eyes widened, sensing a story that could dominate the evening broadcast. She turned to the camera, her voice urgent. "We're live at Riverside Mall, where a decorated veteran has been forcibly removed, and his young granddaughter is being detained inside. Stay tuned for more." The crowd roared, their signs, scrawled with messages like "Respect our vets," waving higher. A group of veterans, some in wheelchairs, others leaning on canes, pushed to the front, their faces etched with the same anger Danny felt. One, a grizzled man with a Marine Corps tattoo, clapped Danny on the shoulder. "We got your back, brother," he said. Danny nodded, a flicker of gratitude breaking through his fury. Inside, the situation spiraled. Carl, cornered by the crowd, radioed for more backup, his voice shaking. "We need SWAT now," he said, exaggerating the threat to save face. The word SWAT sent a ripple of fear through the shoppers, but it only strengthened their resolve. The barista, still streaming, zoomed in on Emily, who stood her ground clutching the unicorn. "I'm not going anywhere without my grandpa," she yelled, her voice small but fierce. The crowd cheered, and the trucker hat guy stepped between her and Carl, his bulk a silent warning. Carl's bravado crumbled. He backed up, his eyes darting to the exits. Buzzcut, overwhelmed, muttered, "This is getting out of hand, man." But Carl wasn't listening. He was too busy trying to salvage his authority. The glass doors burst open as a mall manager, a harried woman in a blazer, stormed in, her face pale. "What is going on here?" she demanded, glaring at Carl. Before he could respond, the distant wail of sirens cut through the air. SWAT was coming, just as Carl had called for, but the sight of flashing lights outside only inflamed the crowd further. The manager's eyes widened as she saw the news van and the growing mob in the parking lot. "You called SWAT?" she hissed at Carl. "For a kid and an old man?" Carl stammered, his confidence evaporating. "They were causing a disturbance," he insisted, but the manager wasn't buying it. She turned to Emily, her expression softening. "Sweetie, where's your grandpa?" Before Emily could answer, the doors flew open again and Danny strode in, flanked by two veterans and the news crew. The crowd parted, their cheers deafening. Emily's face lit up and she ran to him, throwing her arms around his waist. "Grandpa!" she cried, the unicorn bag squished between them. Danny hugged her tight, his eyes glistening but his jaw set. "I'm here, kiddo," he said, his voice steady despite the storm in his heart. He looked up at Carl, who froze under his gaze. "You," Danny said, his voice cutting through the noise like a blade. "You think you can treat people like garbage because you've got a badge? I fought for this country, and I'll be damned if I let you scare my granddaughter." The crowd erupted, their applause shaking the atrium. Carl's face went white, his hands trembling as he realized the cameras were rolling, capturing every second of his humiliation. The manager stepped forward, her voice sharp. "You're suspended, Carl. Get out." The crowd cheered louder, and Carl slunk away, Buzzcut trailing behind him like a scolded dog. The reporter shoved her microphone toward Danny again. "Mr. Whitaker, what do you want people to know?" Danny looked at Emily, then at the crowd. Veterans, families, strangers who'd stood up for him. "I want people to remember what respect looks like," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "We fought for this country and we deserve better than this." As the SWAT team arrived, they found not a riot but a celebration of unity. The officers, seeing the cameras and the crowd, lowered their weapons, one of them, a veteran himself, nodding at Danny with respect. The news crew kept filming, and the viral video surged past 1 million views, sparking a citywide conversation about veterans' treatment. Danny and Emily walked out hand in hand, the unicorn bag swinging between them. The crowd parted, their cheers a balm to Danny's wounded pride. He'd won, not just for himself, but for every veteran who'd ever been dismissed. As they stepped into the night, Danny felt a weight lift, replaced by a quiet pride. He'd shown Emily what it meant to stand tall no matter the odds.